Tell me how did you get the idea? How did you go about it? What is the writing process? Tell me about the book.
So I kind of conceived the idea for the book in 2021. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And really the idea was that I had, in all the reporting I had been doing and the reporting I had seen of AI amongst peers and others, there was a lot of fascination with the tech itself.
Yeah.
How can a software kind
Mm-hmm.
of predict and make decisions in these interesting areas? How can it diagnose diseases? And then later, with the rise of chatbots and language models, how does this technology work?
Mm-hmm.
And also then the fascination with the people building it, the companies, the individuals, like Sam Altman and Elon Musk and
Mm-hmm.
etc. So this was what a lot of the focus of the
Mm-hmm.
coverage around AI has been. And of course, the big questions of, is this going to wipe out humanity? But I thought, for me, the thing that was really missing, which I thought was the most, interesting part of this whole story, was humans.
Yeah.
How are we using it
Yeah.
when we are affected by it? How is it changing our lives? And through the stories of, different people, how can we start to understand how society is changing
Right.
through the rise of this technology?
Right.
And to do that, I wanted to kind of find individuals, people, ordinary people
Mm-hmm.
who, unexpectedly or, in unpredictable ways had
Mm-hmm.
collided with AI and had these ripple effects and impacts that they experienced in their lives. And the other kind of key thing for me to focus on was to make this a global book.
Okay.
I didn't want it to just look at the West or Silicon Valley or, focus on the small group of companies and people who are building this, but really to look beyond at where it had already reached. Because I knew that we had already seen AI systems kind of um, roll out across the world, whether that's through, social media apps and the way that we can see recommendations of apps, of adverts, and of different content and posts. We interface with AI through that, or whether, as I mentioned, through the various gig apps from Swiggy and
Mm-hmm.
Zomato to the Ubers and the Deliveroos and Lyft and so on. I knew this had reached many corners of the world where we hadn't gone looking for stories, of how it had changed people's lives. So the stories that I explore, they cover, everywhere from Kenya to Argentina, Bulgaria, China, Amsterdam, Rome, India, UK, US. So I wanted to kind of look at it from this global perspective and see how in different places it can also have different implications.
Right.
So that was for me the concept of the book. It was people, and it was this outside of the West, the global
Right.
perspective. And that was, my journey was finding the people and then traveling to many of the places in my
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
to see them in person and to kind of understand their social and cultural
Yeah.
context
Yeah.
and bring that to the book. And so I think
Right.
it came out at a time when ChatGPT has kind of burst onto the scene. And so
Mm-hmm.
now many of us are using chatbots like
Mm-hmm.
Gemini or Claude and so on, as well as, these image generators like Midjourney. I've just returned from India yesterday.
Oh.
I have people talking to me about Sora, which is OpenAI's new video generator, where you just type in a description of what you want and it creates a moving video,
Oh.
a multimedia output. And people who talked about using Midjourney for graphic design, which creates images based on descriptions and so on. So this has become something that we're using everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think this made it actually makes the book that much more urgent and
Mm-hmm.
relevant today,
Mm-hmm.
because the book is not about, oh, here's technology and how it works and what it can do, because we're already experiencing that. It's about what happens next, the
Right.
second order effects on people when we start to automate the very human decisions and human
Mm-hmm.
creativity, and
Right.
this kind of, I hope, can help us to think through what could happen next as more of us start using these tools.
Right, right. And like you said, you've traveled to so many places, met so many people, and so many backstories. I didn't even know about data laborers in Kenya and so many of algorithms used by Uber and so many things I didn't know. So can you tell me what was your biggest learning while you while researching the book, while traveling? after writing it? What was your biggest learning that you didn't know before?
I think one of the things that struck me was
Mhm.
that I had written a lot and read a lot about how, AI as a technology itself can be flawed.
Mhm.
Of course, it's a statistical predictive system, so that it's never going to be 100%. And so it makes errors all the time. When it comes to generative AI, which is generating text or images, we call these, or people in the industry call it hallucinations, which means
Mhm.
it makes up facts, names, dates, and so
Right.
on, because
Right.
of how it's just trying to predict the next best word. And so for me, I knew that the technology itself
Mhm.
was flawed. But
Mhm.
what was surprising to me was every time in the stories that I tell, where I show how the tech was harming people,
Mhm.
was hurting people, it wasn't because of the flaws
Was
inherent in
inherent.
the technology
Mhm.
necessarily, but often it was because of human failures in how we implement it,
Okay.
including things like trusting too much in a technology and therefore not building in any backups for it when it did go wrong, or the lack of accountability, introducing a system like facial recognition or a criminal justice prediction algorithm. I write about, for example, an algorithm, a data system that predicts whether children will go on to commit crimes in
Yeah.
Amsterdam.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in all of these examples, when you see people being affected negatively by it, it's because you don't have a human being who's taking accountability for the decisions that are coming out of the AI
Right.
system, right?
Right.
Trusting too much that it's always going to be right, or that it's more objective or more accurate than a human, and not having a human alternative. And we see this with gig workers like Uber drivers too, or Uber riders. And I talk about a computer scientist who happened to also take on some Uber Eats work
Yeah.
for a while,
Yeah. I remember that.
who discovered, and part of his learning was how there was never a human he could get to on the other end to
Mhm.
show when things were going wrong, or when they did go wrong, to
Mhm.
correct it. Right?
Mhm.
So that was the failure that turned up again and again, that we overtrust AI systems. We don't build in guardrails for when they,
Mhm.
when they make errors, which they are bound to do. And we're not creating an accountability system around it, of
Right.
when it go wrong, who can you talk to, who can
Right.
help you, who can
Right.
help you fix it and give you an alternative, right? So
Right.
this is how the harms were sort of propagating.
Mhm.
And the other kind of surprising learning for me was showing how, AI systems are supposed to democratize information, intelligence, to help to kind of reach people who don't have access.
Mhm.
But it was doing the opposite in the
Mhm.
examples and the stories that I tell in my book. Often, it was making inequalities worse. It was the
Mhm.
benefits were being seen by those were already powerful,
Mhm.
maybe white collar workers in offices, or the tech companies
Yeah.
themselves, or uh, entrepreneurs and so on. But the harms were often felt by those who were already vulnerable, marginalized groups who are supposed to benefit from these technologies. And it was actually
Right.
widening these gaps.
Right.
With the deep fakes example, my chapter on deep fakes focuses on two women who discovered that AI systems had been used to manipulate their images and create fake pornography of them. And it's, 98% of deep fakes are non-consensual pornographic images. And of that, about, nearly 99% or so are women. So,
Mhm.
you have constantly these systems are hurting or being used against either minorities or vulnerable marginalized groups,
Right.
um, in every one of these different contexts that I visited. And I felt that that needed to be a big focus going forward as we design and roll out these systems, to make sure and ensure they reach those who need it, and
Right.
really bring the benefits that we've been told that they can bring, and that they do
Right.
have potential.
Can you tell me the ways in which you use AI or the ways in which AI uses you personally, like your
Yeah, I mean, like everybody else, I'm online. So in terms of how I'm shaped by AI, I think
Yeah, yeah.
the recommendation systems are a huge part of my life when it comes even to the music I listen to, the
Mm-hmm.
TV that I watch, the shows, even with my kids,
Mm-hmm.
often when we've watched something on Disney or Netflix, we kind of use the AI suggested recommendations to decide what they watch next. And I think
Yeah,
that shapes
yeah,
our taste too, right?
yeah,
It shapes because there's this huge universe of content out there, but you're
yeah.
only sort of exposed to this very small slice of it.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
not because you got chosen that or necessarily word of mouth. Sometimes that's the case, but
Mhm.
often it's what's surfaced to you through these
Yeah,
systems. And
yeah.
that's in many ways my cultural tastes now are shaped by them. I of course use gig economy apps, but it was interesting. As I said, I just returned from a week in India where I was doing events for my book launches,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned about Blinkit, the 10-minute delivery apps.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I use Uber Eats here too. And but I think the having written about it and understood how some of these systems work, I have started to, push back against that
Okay,
personally.
okay.
And when it's so easy to say, oh, I can just order you bottled water and it'll be here in 10 minutes, but to say no, I'd rather just boil it at home, or I can go and get it myself, and to kind of push back against this world we live in where everything is so easy and
Mm-hmm.
convenient to do with a click of a button, but we forget that there are humans that power it.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely affects me, and I use these, but I think I'm starting to be more thoughtful about, do I really need it? Do I want to be part of a system where where algorithms are sort of controlling how people work, and
Mm-hmm.
in many cases are harming them when they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to get somewhere in 10 minutes.
Right.
Um, because of this false sense of convenience, or this false requirement that we've created through the technology. So yeah, so in like everybody else, I interface with these. I have of course been trying out the generative AI apps too. I've tried out ChatGPT, Gemini, Midjourney. I've written and looked at 11 Labs, which generates audio content. I did a piece where my own voice was used to kind of create an AI generated version of it, and which was pretty scarily accurate.
Oh.
I would say I'm still in the experimenting phase with this, and a lot of it is more to do with trying to understand it better by using it rather than it being in any way incorporated into my daily life. I haven't got to that stage. I haven't found any tool that is useful enough that it's part of my regular um, digital usage yet. But I think it's really important to try them all out, which I continue to do. Um, so that you can personally grasp the sort of opportunities where it works well, and the limitations too. And I
Right.
find it pretty useful for looking up certain people or the relationships between different people, things that are hard to Google. Like these two co-founders, where did they work? That was a common place. Or can you tell
Okay.
me more about this person that I'm going to go interview? And it's
Okay.
tools like Perplexity, which is sort of an AI, um, generative AI search engine,
Okay.
are really, really useful for those
Okay.
sorts of slightly left field queries that Google, it's hard to sort of Google about people. So
Okay.
yes, I am using the tools a bit more, but more as an experimenter
Right.
than as
Right.
an adopter.
As a AI reporter, you might be asked a lot, but do you think AI is going to become sentient?
No. I
No,
guess
you
is the
don't.
easy answer. I mean, it's obviously never say never. And as somebody who's also really interested in the science of this, I'll be watching to see how it evolves, right? How it becomes maybe more sophisticated. As it becomes more sophisticated, whether it's able to, um, you know, make decisions or have outputs that we as humans are going to find even more difficult to tell if it's AI or human. And that's going to impact how we as a society view the technology, right? Even today, already, when people interact with ChatGPT, they tend to humanize it or
Mm-hmm.
anthropomorphize it.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell it secrets and things and that they don't even tell their own friends or family. They use it as a therapist or a mentor or a friend or a partner. And so currently, I think it's a lot more about us viewing it as sentient and what that means for our society than it actually becoming sentient.
Right,
I think
right,
that, yeah,
right,
the bigger concern is if we start to treat this and see this as something that's kind of human adjacent, how it's going to change our relationship with each other,
right.
and how we kind of function as a society. So yeah, so I don't see any glimmers of sentience today, and I think the jury is really out from a scientific perspective on whether you can ever get something that's sentient that isn't carbon based, something that isn't living,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's enough, even using a, silicon substrate, just, to have whether intelligence even is enough for
Mm,
consciousness. And I think that's a whole other rabbit hole. And I don't believe, I think I sort of, I'm more convinced by the school of thought that there needs to be some form of life, carbon-based life, for something to be sentient or conscious.
right,
But I
right.
guess that's the future.